This is A Silent War Within, the podcast dedicated to confronting the unseen mental health battles carried by our first responder and healthcare heroes. This show is about real stories, real struggles, and real ways to survive the storm and come out stronger on the other side. For too long, stigma has kept you silent, but this is your space to bravely break that silence, share vital insights, and build a community where your well-being truly comes first, because your service deserves unwavering support.
Hey everybody, welcome to A Silent War Within. This is Michaela, Jason, and our very special guest today, Jennifer Weaver. How are you both doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Jason?
I'm good. I'm blessed.
Blessed. If you guys don't remember, Jason was on our episode. I can't remember which one it was. I wrote it down last time, Jason. Anyway, it aired on October 31st. He did a note from Dad. If you have not went and seen that video, go check it out. It is amazing. And Kevin is out right now. He had a medical emergency. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks on some intense IV antibiotics, and he is still at home recovering with those IV antibiotics with him. So please send prayer requests from him. He's on some intense PTOT while he gets back on his feet. Okay. All right. So let's jump right into it. So today we have a very special guest, Jennifer Weaver. Jennifer is the owner of Polaris Counseling Consulting, and she prides herself on improving the well-being and mental health of first responders. With more than 20 years in the behavioral health field, Jennifer guides first responders through a variety of different techniques to combat PTSD, trauma, substance abuse, addiction, and other behavioral health challenges. She is a nationwide powerhouse speaker, wellness consultant, and clinical trainer, and we are so lucky to have her with us today. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So Jennifer, just kind of dive right in. Tell us how you got started in this field, your background, and kind of what made you want to do this job.
So when I was out of undergrad, I was a child protective services worker. And that's what I thought I was going to do. I thought I was going to work with kids. I was going to work in child protective services. It turns out it's actually quite traumatic of a job. So after a few years there, I became a prison therapist, and I was in the prison for about a decade, and I loved it. I loved trauma work. And when I got out of the prison and went into private practice, that trauma work very quickly translated into working with first responders. So I've been doing a lot of trauma work with firefighters and police, primarily firefighters, and EMS.
So I'm a firm believer that there has to be a person behind the badge or a person behind the license, whatever you say. So what do you like to do in your free time to kind of help your own mental health?
So I love to preach that everybody should disconnect and go home and live your life. I'm actually really terrible at it, but it is something that I'm working on. I have a 4-year-old, and we just hit summer vacation as of last night. I have a preschool graduate. Well, my plan for the summer is to take Fridays off, not see any patients, not do any trainings. But other than that, I like to be with my family. I like to be with my friends. I'm a big believer that I fill my cup by connecting with people who I care about. And that's really important to me, sort of the connections that I have in my life. And other than that, I want to say I have something super exciting that I could tell you about myself, but I like my couch and my 4-year-old, if we're being completely honest.
I do too. And I'm a nurse at night. And so
Yeah.
just like knowing your bed is waiting on you, excuse me, when you get home, knowing your bed is waiting on you is just top tier enjoyment.
100%.
And Jason, you have your kids and all this kind of stuff running around. What do you do to fill your own cup?
Oh man.
I put you on the spot.
Well, it's funny because not funny. It's ironic funny that you asked that, because as soon as Jennifer said that you're not good at doing that yourself, right? Like my next question for you, I was sitting there thinking, like, what is it about us that's so good at telling other people what to do to be healthy that we don't follow our own advice? I do have some things that fill my cup. Really, it's just family and friends. It's just hanging out with my kids and being around my people. My wife and I joke all the time that there are just some days that we're done with people, but I'm never done with my people. Like, I could always fill my cup with my people, right? So I'll spin that back to you. Like, to go back to that question, like, what is it about first responders, therapists, really, I think anybody, you fill in the blank, that we're so good at giving other people great advice for how to disconnect and fill our own cup, fill their cup, and yet we're so hesitant to do that for ourselves. Why is that?
I think when you look at the helping profession, right, we have all the answers. We are just helpers by nature. So we aren't often fantastic at applying that to ourselves. And when I started training within the fire departments, let's say 15 years or so ago, I was really I was like, hey guys, here's how you take care of yourself. And they were like, yeah, we're not going to do any of that. So as soon as I pivoted the training and I said, here's how you take care of the guys next to you at the kitchen table, here's how you take care of the guys on the truck, they were like, oh, we actually can do that. And I was like, cool, let's pivot. Let's look at how, if I can get you all to take care of each other, right?
That's right.
Then our goal is met. So if I can't necessarily get you to take care of yourself, but I can get you to take care of the guy next to you, fantastic. So when guys sit on my couch to talk about, for whatever reason they come in, 9 times out of 10, they'll say, so-and-so told me to call you. And listen, if that is what gets people into therapy, I'll take it. So I think when you bring a bunch of helpers together by nature, they're just not fantastic at taking care of themselves, although they do know the answer. So sometimes you have to change the narrative to just get the buy-in.
Great.
I love that.
Awesome. I do
And
too.
then is there a certain point that you said, I'm going to change my whole career path to protecting the minds of people who run to danger and not away from it?
No, listen, there are 2 very, very high populations of ADHD in this country, and one is incarcerated individuals, and one is individuals who work in the fire service. And do with that information what you will, but it actually was a much softer pivot than one would imagine. And it's just, I like to work with individuals who live with trauma. I like those harder conversations. Listen, I will entertain a 20-minute conversation with you that you're frustrated your Volvo won't start, but like, that's not really what I want to talk about, right? That's not where like my passion is. I want to hear about the really, really tough stuff that you're struggling with, coupled with how that's maybe impacting your family life. And I did not think I would be accepted into the fire service in the way that I was. And I think some of that is because I met some really great people who pulled me in and allowed that connection to happen. Some of it is that I did all the things I was afraid of. I do burns regularly. I climb on top of trucks. I hate that stuff. You guys love that stuff. I've know it, it's terrifying. I don't. But it's this really interesting population of people who are super okay with running towards danger, but clam up the second I ask them to talk about their feelings.
That is so
Yeah,
true.
I agree. And I think, one, kudos to you for recognizing that level of trust that a firefighter or a first responder needs to build with somebody in therapy, a therapist, is born through adversity and similar experiences. So the fact that you're willing to gear up and jump in and do some of that stuff with them to the extent that to the level that it's possible or that you're able, kudos to you for doing that, because that's breaking down barriers in and of itself, and I think that's what's drawing people towards you. So that's cool. When I started in the fire service, I've been in the fire service 28 years as a career firefighter, 32 years total with my volunteer service. And when I first started, mental health wasn't a thing that we talked about. It was maybe an awareness level, like it's there, whatever. But I still remember sitting down in my first critical incident debrief and going around the room with 15 other people, sharing how they experienced that pediatric trauma and what they're feeling about it. And when it came to us, my captain, there was 3 of us there. My captain was the first to speak, and I was only a year or 2 on the job. And he said, we're good. Not I'm good, we're good. Which communicated to me as a new guy, like, hey, this is not something that we're just not gonna do this. So let's compartmentalize it. Let's lock it down. And I'm curious, what is it in your work that told you or that illuminated for you that there was an invisible war being fought amongst first responders?
I have the luxury of a father-in-law who just retired from the fire service about a year and a half ago. So this was somebody that I was kind of hearing all these stories from. And individuals in the fire service were coming to therapy, whether it was for couples therapy or stuff. They were not highlighting that any of it was connected to work, right? But when we were seeing relational issues at home, we were seeing estranged relationships with teens or adult children. We were seeing substance use disorders. We were saying, like, hey guys, there's a common denominator here, right? There is something that you're taking helpers by nature, and you're telling me that individuals who are helpers by nature have high rates of divorce, substance use disorder, domestic violence, and other things. And that doesn't make sense when you define a helper by nature. So I think for me, I was looking at this population of people and I was saying, like, something's wrong, right? it doesn't make sense that you're taking people who willingly run towards danger to help others, and then their coping skills at home are so poor. That doesn't make sense to me, right? Because these are people who are good people when we look at character, when we look at the reason why people are drawn towards certain occupations, right? And I think we saw a population where we said, like, something's not clicking. And I think what we did was we took a population of people, oversaturated them in trauma, but did not provide them with coping skills. So they coped the way that you just described by saying, like, we're good, or going to the bar after a critical instant debrief and drinking, right? Or potentially going home and not being able to connect with their loved ones because maybe you did have a pediatric incident and you have little ones at home. So disconnecting with those kids is a lot less scary than connecting with those kids for some people. So I think it was that. I think it was seeing the disconnect between the type of people attracted to the job and the stuff we were seeing happen in their home lives.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I love that. What do you think that culture that surrounds mental health? It still, to me, feels like it's still a taboo subject. I think I was thinking about this the other day. I've talked about this for a couple weeks now. In the fire service, we have different levels for specialty training. So, for example, we have hazardous materials, awareness, operations, technician, and specialist. So, all graduating levels of expertise. Somebody at the awareness level just has a basic 8-hour, 4 to 8 hour class that kind of understands, hey, these are the things to be aware of. When we translate that to the first responder community for PTSD and mental health, I think we've been, over the last probably 10, 15, maybe 20 years, stuck in this awareness level. These are the signs and symptoms. These are the things that you recognize there's a problem. I think it's time to step that up to at least an operations level. I look at somebody like you and I think, well, Jennifer's clearly at the technician level for mental health, right? She has the tools to mitigate the problem and to help us mitigate the problem. What's the operations level look like or even the technician level for somebody that's in the trenches? What are the tools that they can have that help them better cope?
I think it's about being proactive. And I think one of the things about mental health is the stigma with mental health is still that you don't seek mental health treatment until there's a problem, right? But I go to my dermatologist proactively, right? I get a skin check every year. And if we're telling the truth, I also get my Botox done very proactively. But I see certain specialists proactively, right? I don't wait until I can't see to go to my optometrist. There's the stigma around mental health that you should wait until there's a problem. And I think when we talk about making it more operational, the pivot needs to be towards this proactive approach to mental health. I want your guys when they're in the academy, right? That is when I want to teach them the awareness stuff because it's fantastic. I want them to go into, but also they're not going into the academy as a blank slate. Some of them may be lucky enough to not be bringing trauma into their first day of work, but some of them grew up with trauma or they were exposed to trauma, right? Some of them may already be overindulging in substance use, right? And so I think there's this proactive approach, and something that we've been seeing that's effective is familiarizing your members with a clinician, meaning the most proactive way to do it is to have a clinician around your department. I don't necessarily mean employed by your department or around your department all the time, but a clinician who comes on your trainings, a clinician who, when there is a crisis, you already know them by name, right? It's not just we're going to bring in the therapist, right? Because that you're not going to tell me anything. If I'm just the therapist to you, if I'm Jen, you and I may actually have a conversation, but if I'm just the therapist to you and the first time you see me is after you just had the worst night of your career, you're probably not going to tell me much. But if I know you, if I've been lucky enough to be in some of your special hazards trainings, or I've done a ladder training with you, or, I live in Rhode Island where we get lots of ice. So, they want to put me in a snowsuit and float me out into the river and save me. If I've been lucky enough that we can sort of exchange that, it increases the likelihood that if you've had the worst night of your career, you know that Jen is coming, right? Or someone who's immersed in your department. And this sort of proactive approach of, all right, we know her, or we know this person, or we know this team. These are people we can talk to. So I think this idea of, like, I don't want you to come to me when you are 35 years on the job and you're like, Jen, I can't go to one more pediatric incident. I cannot have one more 2-year-old handed to me at the door. I want to be there for you that night, but I want to already know you, right? I want you to come to me when you're 6 months on the job and you just saw CPR done on a child, okay? Or you've just seen CPR done for the first time, right? those are the relationships I think we need to have. And that's what the research is showing. The research is actually showing that if you are more proactive with first responders about behavioral health treatment, you increase the likelihood that you bring down PTSD rates. The other thing that brings down PTSD rates, and this is super easy, and if I could get every department to subscribe to this, right? When I am exposed to trauma, my brain does not know the difference between being chased by a bear in the woods or paying my taxes a few days late. Okay. Stress is stress to my brain.
Mhm.
Okay. So when we are exposed to trauma, if I can teach your brain that it was not your emergency, that it was someone else's emergency, we drive down the rates of PTSD or CPTSD, which is what we see in first responders. The best way to do it is this. If within an hour of exposure to a trauma, a body can be at rest, that does not mean sleep. It just means physically at rest, like seated. There's access to food, okay, whether you eat it or not. So pizza's ordered, whatever it may be, and access to support. So guys on the job you trust, or being sent home to be with your family, whatever that may be. Those three things teach your amygdala that it does not need to fire. It teaches your flight or fight, it does not need to fire. Because if I am running from a bear through the woods, I am not stopping to rest. I'm not stopping to have a pizza, and I'm sure as hell not hanging out with my friends, right? So if we can do those three things within an hour of exposure to a traumatic event, there's your concrete tool that you guys can walk away with, right? If I can get officers on board with that, if I can get administration on board with that if you take someone out of service for 45 minutes and let them sit and eat a sandwich, we dramatically drive down PTSD rates. It's really that simple sometimes.
That
It's
is,
really cool.
it is amazing. Like that's a lot to absorb. I have to
Sorry,
say for a
sorry.
second.
I didn't know that.
No, that's perfect. I love it. It's a lot to absorb, and it's good. Don't apologize for that, because that's good stuff. And what I want to do here is take a minute to implore, and I'll ask you this question, but this is my perspective. I want to implore our administrative
Yeah.
teams that this is like when you talk about introducing yourself and really getting to meet firefighters, first responders, like at the academy level, like that's huge. Bringing therapists around or a clinician around and engaging, like to me, that has to be done at an administrative level. And so if you're an administrator in your organization and you're listening to this podcast, watching this podcast right now, I want you to go back and watch the last 5 minutes, watch her and listen to what she's saying, because she's telling you that this is on you as much as it is on us, because that is a policy change within a lot of organizations and a lot of agencies. And if you're not an administrator listening to this, if you're just a guy or gal on the front lines, man, forward this to somebody who is. Start having these conversations with people at the administrative level and recognize, I can't even hardly sum up everything you just said, because everything you just said nails it on the head. Like that's where it's got to start. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I think we look sometimes where my colleagues, I think, make a mistake in this field is we try to go in and we try to get you to be softer and be more in touch with your feelings. And to some extent, that's actually a little more dangerous because I cannot make your job easier for you. I cannot make the world safer for you. None of those things are going to happen. What we can do is build up your resilience. And the way that we do that is we look at the brain the way that it is. It is an organ, right? And if we can treat it the way that we treat any organ, right? The way that we tell you, for example, if you sit in a sauna after exposure to a fire, or if you indulge in creatine after a fire, you decrease the likelihood of absorbing those things. Your brain's an organ as well, right? I just need you guys to buy each other a pizza, and I need you to let people sit in a recliner. And because when I was just at FDIC, and I had chiefs come up to me and listen, they will throw money at mental health to bring down suicide rates, which is fantastic. And then I say things like, well, what's your policy about bumper time? What's your policy about letting your members sit in a recliner at 3 p.m. if they're working a 24-hour shift? And they'll say like, well, yeah, if the chores are done. And I'm like, cool, on a regular Tuesday, I get that the chores matter. If you just did locally, we just had a child pulled from the water because it's warm up here now. If you had a day like that, on a Friday, the chores don't need to get done. I need you guys to sit down. So if you're telling me you will throw all this money at suicide prevention, I need you to let recliners be used.
Yeah.
It's not about money. It's about the really simple stuff to understand that the brain is an organ. And we can't make your job simpler, but we certainly can treat the body like a body. And we can override it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing too I wanted to point out before we move on was I just saw on your social media account while we were preparing for this episode that you talk about like cortisol, high cortisol,
Yeah.
in first responders and how to decrease that. I thought that was really cool. Can you share that here?
Yeah. So first responders in general are typically running around with higher cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone, right? And when I tell people that, they nod at me. But I've learned that if I appeal to your vanity, I can get people to apply. So cortisol goes straight to your gut. So there's two ways to get cortisol out of your system. One is to de-stress, and the other is to cry, like literal physical tears. Tears are built up with cortisol reserves. Uh, If you do not get cortisol out of your system, it goes straight to your abdomen. So if I can just at least appeal to people's vanity, sometimes I can get them to understand that they need to bring down their cortisol. But one of the simplest ways to bring down your cortisol is to rest. That's it. And I don't even mean sleep, because I know once I start talking about sleep, listen, it fills up my inbox real quick. Everyone telling me the 93 reasons why they can't sleep. I get it. I need your body to physically be at rest. That brings down your cortisol. When I am seated on a couch in my living room, even answering emails on my laptop, but my legs are up, my body recognizes that its stress level can go down, cortisol goes down. The other way you can do that is through breathing. If my exhale is longer than or equal to my inhale, it tells my brain to decrease its cortisol reserve.
I thought that was
So,
interesting when I saw that.
yeah, if you can breathe in for 4 seconds and exhale for at least 4 seconds. If you exhale shorter than your inhale, you'll start to hyperventilate, which is the opposite of what we want to do when you're stressed. So if you can exhale longer than your inhale, you bring down your cortisol reserve. So some of this is it's just really that simple.
It's like biohacking for
Yeah, yes,
therapy.
I just need you to override your system. You are an animal at the end of the day. We all are. Our bodies
Yeah.
are just animals. It's just biology. I just need you to override it.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? I literally was just talking to a nurse the other day. You were talking about the room to like de-stress. We in our hospital, they do a really good job of this. They have a room where after EMTs bring their patients in,
Mhm.
traumas and all that stuff, they have a room where all the lights are turned down, there's comfy
Cool.
chairs, and they have snacks and energy drinks. And that's
Mhm.
just the way to a first responder's heart.
Yeah,
So I'm like
absolutely.
that now I know why they do that, you know?
Yeah, a hospital near us just opened a first responder room, and they actually haven't filled the fridge with drinks or snacks yet. But the members have heard that eventually the fridge will be filled, and the morale just shot through the roof just knowing that eventually there will be some Skittles and some monsters in there. And it hasn't
Yes.
even happened yet. So yeah.
We're all the same person across the entire United States.
True story.
While it is very sad, a lot of first responders refuse to seek help because they're afraid they're going to get fired. Not
Uh-huh.
even get fired, but they're going to be labeled as the problem child of their department if they're constantly utilizing the therapist, right? What would you say to those people?
Well, I can tell you what I do. I can tell you that I don't do any sessions on site unless it is crisis debrief. All of my sessions are private. Any clinician who is reporting back to your department is violating HIPAA. So we need to be super clear about that. So I have a very strict rule with all my departments where unless you are going out on leave and you need me to make your department aware that you are in therapy, your department will not be aware that you were in therapy. So I think, listen, would I like to break the stigma and just say like everybody should understand that it's super healthy to go to therapy? But that's not happening right now, right? So what I will say is this: your therapy should be private. It should be like any other medical provider that you see. And if it's not private, you should definitely take issue with that because we should be able. You should never say something in my office that can be used against you.
Right. Do you ever suggest that someone would go on leave, like in your therapy
Mhm.
practice? You do for their
Yeah,
mental health?
I would say 9 times out of 10 people ask me. It's not usually something that I have to push on, but occasionally I will say like, "Listen, if you get that call tomorrow, if you go on shift tomorrow and you get that call, what's your life look like in the next 36, 72 hours or a week?" And they'll say like, "I'm fine unless that happens." And I'm like, "Okay, I can't guarantee that's not going to happen though." So what will that mean for you if it does happen? And at that point, usually we'll get people to kind of say like, "You're right, maybe I need to take a step back. And maybe I kind of need to go on whatever it is, 2 weeks, 3
Yeah.
months, I mean 30 days, whatever that may be for people." And usually by the time people come to me if they're going to do something like inpatient, they already know they're headed towards inpatient. They just need somebody to agree with them so that they feel better about it.
Yeah, I completely. And when you say inpatient, what do you mean? Like go on?
I mean, yeah, usually when we send people out of state for more intensive mental health treatment. So like your centers for excellence or your first responder specific treatment centers.
A lot of times I like to ask those questions just for clarification because
Yeah.
before I started talking about mental health, I didn't know anything about, I mean, I'm a nurse, but I'm not working in the behavioral health unit, you know? So a lot
Okay.
of times, I like for people to know, your therapist could suggest you could go to an inpatient rehab, or they could suggest you take a leave of absence, or, they could suggest that you, hopefully not, but if it's really causing you suicidal ideations and stuff, they may ask you to step away from your career for a little bit.
Sure.
So I just want people to know that you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortability of seeing a therapist. That's
Mhm.
why they're there to help you. Would you agree with that?
100%. And actually, if you're going to therapy and you're not all that uncomfortable, you probably need a new therapist.
That's absolutely true.
I
Right.
literally thought the same thing. I'm like, it's uncomfortable, and that's where growth happens. It's
Yeah.
a muscle. The brain's a muscle. You just said it, right? Or it's an organ, right? It's the same. I love that. That's awesome.
Also, if I'm comfortable, I'm not going to change. So change only happens
Mhm.
through discomfort, right? If my foot falls asleep, it's uncomfortable and I move my foot. So we have to make people uncomfortable. If you go to therapy and you feel, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, I love my therapist, I leave every time with a smile on my face and I never feel uncomfortable, that person might be lovely. They're not the right therapist for you.
Dang, I love that. Some hard truths. We need to put that as our thumbnail.
Let me ask you this. So or this wasn't on the script. You may have to edit this.
That's
I,
fine.
I, so my therapist, I was with my guy for about 6 years,
Mhm.
right? And I hit that point where it's like, it's kind of comfortable. I don't know that I consciously said this is too comfortable. I came to a point where I realized I'm not. We're just kind of going through the motions here. Talk about that for just a second.
Sure.
Like what that length of time looks like. For some people, it's 6 months. For some people, it might be 6 years.
Yeah, it looks different for everybody. And I think, listen, there's only so much I can bring to the table, not because of capacity, just because I'm one person with one set of experiences, with a certain perspective on life. So sometimes switching up your therapist just means they're bringing something else to the table that your previous therapist just didn't, because they're different people, right? And I think the thing about therapy and therapeutic relationships is we sometimes have these parasocial friendships that happen. This idea of well, I really like my therapist and I know about their lives a little bit and they know about me and I don't want to start over. And it's right, but sometimes to make that change, you have to start over because it just is what it is. And I think any good therapist will not want you to become so dependent on them that you never see another therapist. Right. That's actually a huge red flag in therapy. If your therapist gets a little weird about you seeing another therapist, that's a huge red flag because you're not dating. So you should be
Yeah.
allowed to see other people. And I think, but that can range. Some people come in for 3 months and they're like, Jen, I feel great. And some people I see for years. And then eventually we have to kind of, nudge them out of the nest a little and say, you either are in a good place and maybe you don't need therapy right now, or I need you to see somebody else because I've given you what I have. And I hope you've taken some of it, but let's find someone who has other things as well.
Is that like the
That's
beating the
awesome.
dead horse analogy? I've heard your
Yes.
stories. We've unpacked it a million
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes I'm like, you're never going to leave this person. You're going to stay in this relationship forever. It doesn't matter
Right.
how many times I tell you it's super toxic. So maybe we find you a new therapist who can drive it home in a different way.
Well, and that's a good point because me and my therapist, we're good friends now,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that relationship just kind of shifted a little bit, and that's okay. And I would say, let me ask you what your thoughts are on this: that a red flag for a therapist or a counselor is if your therapist is not seeing a therapist. To
Yeah.
me, that's a red flag. What are your
Yes.
thoughts on that?
If I am talking to you about talking about your trauma and I'm oversaturated in hearing first responders trauma all the time and I'm doing nothing about it, yeah, that's a red flag. I
Yeah,
think,
Yeah.
it's like having an AA sponsor who drinks. I mean, I
yeah.
think your therapist should be in therapy because we understand the value of ongoing
Mhm.
therapy.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. I always thought that's a good first question for somebody to ask as you go in and
Yeah.
you're
People
starting that
ask it all the
process.
time.
Looking, yeah, good.
People ask it all the time. And that's how I ended up on top of fire trucks and on top of burning buildings because one of the questions I got from the guys was, they said, you're asking us to do something that makes us uncomfortable. What do you do that makes you uncomfortable? And I was like, that's actually a very valid question. And the answer is nothing. I currently don't, I don't. And they were like, what are you afraid of? And I was like, heights. And they were like, we have a 35-foot ladder in the bay. And I was like, that sounds terrible. And they were like, let's go. And if you know this about firefighters, we went immediately. We
Of
stopped
course.
what we were doing, and we stood up and went immediately to the truck. And before I had a chance to think about it, I was 35 feet in the air. But that was the question they asked. You want us to make ourselves uncomfortable. How do you make yourself uncomfortable? And that is how I ended up in burning buildings. So
That's
it's probably
awesome.
my
and
fault.
Kudos.
Jason, let me hijack your question really quick because I had a
Yeah.
question to
Yep.
ask her. How do you explain the difference, like between just your run-of-the-mill therapist and a trauma-informed therapist? That's really important.
Yeah, I mean, a trauma-informed therapist should have additional training, right? It also should be. I'm a graduate professor at one of the universities in Providence, and one of the things I tell my baby therapists is, first of all, when you graduate, you're an expert on nobody. So I need 24 and 25-year-old therapists to stop calling themselves experts in fields you're not, and I mean that with all the love in the world. You're just not. Uh, and I need you to work with a handful of populations until you find one that you click with. And then I need you to go learn everything you can about that population, what they live with, what they're exposed to, and how to treat them. So your trauma-informed therapist should be someone who has additional training in trauma. Okay. We get a baseline training in trauma in graduate school and just through basic exposure, but you have to actually go get trained to be a trauma-informed practitioner.
That's awesome. What are some of the tools that you use as a trauma informed and as that specialized role that a normal therapist may not use?
Well, I can apply it to the fire service. I will tell you this. I'll tell you my most controversial one. And I will tell you this. Unless you don't drink, I will never tell you not to drink because one, who am I? And two, there's actually no rule that if you go out after shift and have a few beers, that you aren't also processing your trauma at the same time. What I will tell you not to do is please don't show up to therapy drunk because it's a waste of both of our times. But unless you don't want to drink, I will never tell you not to. I will tell you not to like smoke crack or do cocaine. But as far as I will work within the fire culture, and I think when we work with trauma informed care, this is the idea of like, I need to work within the culture with which you are in, right? And I think the other thing about trauma informed care is not everything should be brought to the surface because sometimes that increases the trauma. And that needs to be done with a clinician. It's not necessarily for individuals to decide, like, hey, is this something I should talk about? Because, yeah, it's probably something at some point we should talk about, but maybe not today. Because I need to know who you're going home to. Oh, you're going through a divorce, you're going home to an empty house, and your divorce hearing's in 2 days. No, we're not talking about this today then. I'm not setting you up for the next 48 hours in that way. Oh, you're going home to a spouse of yours who also has a trauma affiliated job. Maybe you are, not to stereotype, maybe you're married to an ER nurse and you are going home to somebody who understands your exposure to trauma and you absolutely can debrief with and feel safe with. Then like, okay, yes, maybe we talk about this today. So I think part of having a trauma informed therapist is somebody who's not going to say like, let's explore that the second something comes out of your mouth, because sometimes it's not a safe time to explore that.
That's really
That's
smart.
good
I never
stuff.
thought about that.
I hadn't either. Part of the resistance, I think, for people to seek mental health help, therapy, counseling, is that fear of being vulnerable. I know
Yeah.
it's true in men. I see it in men all the time in the work I do. I can't speak for women because I'm not a woman. I don't work with women. So, but I know that's to be true with men. Like we have a real hard time being vulnerable and opening up. So walk us through that first visit, that first session with you or somebody similar to you that's a trauma-informed practitioner. What could somebody expect?
The first few sessions, you should just be telling me about you. You should be in charge of your sessions, meaning we should not be talking about anything that you don't feel ready to talk about. There is a big need for trust in the fire service, right? And think about it. Like with the job, you have to trust the people you are running into a burning building with, because you have to trust that if anything goes wrong, they are competent and selfless enough to take you with them on the way out the door, right? So there is trust and rapport that needs to be built, and trauma-informed therapists will typically spend quite a bit of time, or at least the first few sessions, just talking. You don't even need to tell me your worst stuff. You could tell me about your favorite day in first grade if that's what you want to talk about when you come in, because all of those things help me understand you. So I think there needs to be this idea of like, listen, if you want to come in and you want to word vomit at me and throw it all out there, cool, let's do it. I'm not necessarily going to ask you to elaborate, but if you want to come in and you want to withhold some things for a bit, that's okay too, because I need you not only to trust me, I need us to click, right? Because what I don't want you to do is come in and tell me all your trauma, and then 2 or 3 sessions in, you're like, hey, Jen's not actually my person. I actually don't like her demeanor or the way that she approaches topics or her verbiage or whatever it may be. And that's okay, right? You need to find a therapist who you click with. So I think like taking that time to really roll into that is super important. And if we're talking to therapists, there's an ethics component to that, right? I should never be, the second you sit on my couch, I should not be saying like, tell me about your worst day. A red flag is this. If you go to a therapist and you are a first responder and they say, tell me about the worst call you've ever been on, like every Christmas party you've ever been to that someone asks you, right?
Yeah.
That therapist doesn't work with first responders. They're not trained to work with first responders because someone who's trained to work with individuals in your field will never ask that question.
That's awesome, because
love that.
I would probably get up and walk out.
Yeah,
Because
as
that
you
is,
should.
I've been asked that question before. Like you said, at the Christmas parties or just hanging out. Hey, tell me the worst thing you ever did or ever saw.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh wow, I really wasn't expecting to live that again. Thank you for that. Right.
Yep.
So,
No, a therapist who is culturally competent into the fire culture will not ask you that question. So if someone asks you that question, they just don't have the cultural competence to work within that culture.
Have you seen Code 3? That's like their opening scene where they go in to get a burger and the lady next to them is like, "What's the worst thing you've ever seen?" That is so true. We actually
it
had the
is.
guy who wrote the script for Code 3 on our podcast. He was really nice.
Really?
So if all
Yeah.
y'all want to see that, you should go back and watch it. It's hilarious.
It's a good movie, Jennifer. If you haven't seen it, you need to go watch it. It will
I
definitely.
haven't, but
hilarious.
you are like the 19th person to recommend it to me.
Yeah.
So I have to.
It
I
will
have to
inform your trauma informed.
Yeah.
It
Yeah. I have to
will.
go.
Yep.
Good stuff.
You're gonna laugh when you see how many similarities in the movie that there are to like real life people,
Mhm.
because it's like just the funny little things about like going to the nursing home and the person's already dead. That's like every day. Like that's it.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
movie is not an exaggeration. And sometimes like I think a lot of times one thing that keeps people that are, really, really bad on their mental health or really down, I think one thing that like keeps them above water, and this is why they don't seek therapy, is just the funniness of the job.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's hilarious and that's what keeps you going.
It is. I am lucky that there are a handful of departments around me that will periodically like invite me out for lunch or invite me to dinner at their table. And I'm a big believer in like having a clinician eat with you, not in a therapeutic way, but just to be around. And the conversations that are had at those tables sometimes. I think, listen, this is why the transition from prison to fire service works so well. There weren't filters in either place. And
It's not.
but I have learned that is the fastest way you get individuals to trust you is if you tell a
Yeah.
really uncouth joke and people laugh. There's a lot of trust in that because there's connection in that. And I think
Yeah.
the humor is helpful. So I think tell all the jokes. I need you to process the stuff as well. But if it starts with you telling the really horrible jokes, listen, I've been on some ride-alongs where we've been in some really dark calls, some really dark situations, and people are still cracking jokes. That is a coping skill. It's
Yeah.
fine. I mean, say it in front of the right people, right? But like, it's a coping skill as long as the processing happens as well. There's nothing wrong with that humor. It's what's keeping people going.
Right. And a lot of like I've been a nurse for 10 years and I work in float pool, so I work on a lot of different units. And we have this one unit in our hospital that we work in that's kind of like the hospice unit. And it's not labeled that, but it is. And almost every single shift I work on that floor, we're putting people in body bags. And just
Yep.
kind of my thing that I do always is just it's a monotonous task. And I put people in body bags so often that it's not even a thing to me. Like it's just another day at work. And the new nurses haven't quite gotten there yet. And I play like oldies music and like sing to the top of my lungs at 3 a.m. while we're putting this person in a body bag. And it's just makes the monotonous act like
Yes.
it's just a lighthearted thing to it. And some of the nurses are like, how can you sing to Elvis and you're putting someone in a body bag? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's just my coping mechanism after 10 years.
And
Like,
it's probably working because it's signaling to listen, if I'm singing to Elvis at the top of my lungs, I'm not running from a bear, right?
that's right.
So while you are experiencing this really negative event that could be traumatic for some, you are telling your amygdala that this is not actually my emergency, right? And you are probably driving down your likelihood of something like PTSD as a result. So you're that's self-care, my dear.
Yes.
Whatever. And it might look weird to other people, but if it allows you to remain effective and efficient and continue to help people as a nurse, then that's self-care.
Yeah, actually, we were talking about this the other day too, because my husband, I was going to work and he was like, "Hey, did you hear that big bang in our local town? We had like a lithium battery blow up, and so like they had like 4 or 5 departments respond to this lithium battery fire, and the ambulance and the fire truck passed me with all their windows down, and they were like blaring rap music, and it kind of made me think of the same thing. I was like, that's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when do you have a situation where you're giving someone therapy and it's cluing in your head that maybe therapy is not enough? Maybe we need to start some medications. And who do you refer them to if that happens?
Yeah, I think when we start looking at a disillusion of functionality, right? So if you're telling me like my wife and I or my husband and I should have started couples counseling 4 years ago, or I have not told my spouse anything personal in 2 years, or anytime suicide is mentioned. Suicide is not a normal symptom. It is a common symptom. It is not a normal symptom. And we need to be super clear about that. Suicide always points to a diagnosis. It is not a normal experience for every person to have. So if you think to yourself, like, well, doesn't everyone think about dying? Nope. No, they do not. So the second you have that thought, that points to me that something else should be happening. If you are feeling disconnected to the people you loved, we see a lot in men, irritability and rage. Irritability and rage are the most primary symptoms of depression in men because we socialize boys to be angry, we socialize girls to be sad. So women present as your typical depressed patient where they are more tearful. Men present as angry and irritable. That's depression. That's what it looks like. If we see substance use getting out of control. So anytime we look at something that like, listen, I know that this is your career, but we have careers so that we can live our lives. If your career is gotten to the point where it is not allowing you to live your life, then you need something more.
Yeah. And so if a person does say they come in your office and they're like, "Hey, Jennifer, I've been really contemplating suicide. It
Mhm,
happens a lot. It was just a surface thing, like
mhm,
every now and again, but now it's like every day I'm thinking about
mhm.
it." What is like your action plan for that when they say that?
My what I've learned about first responders is a first responder only tells you they're thinking about suicide if they know that you're going to intervene. And the intention is for you to intervene. Because listen, like first responders are mandated reporters, so they are not sharing suicidal ideation with you unless they know that you're about to intervene, right? Otherwise, they're just going to keep it from you. So thankfully, when individuals say that to me, they're usually looking for me to get involved in some capacity. My go-to is usually, okay, how do you want to handle it? What's the plan? And usually people have a plan. And if they don't, I'll say, cool, who are we calling from your department that's going to take you to the ER? Like if you don't want it, because first responders don't want me calling an ambulance to my office. And I say, that's fine. Who are we calling? Who do you trust that I know is going to take you? What's the plan? What are we doing? Um, what I have seen a trend is people actually calling me from their chief's offices. That has been a thing where like a chief will call me early in the morning and say, so and so just showed up at the department, came to me, told me they were thinking about this. I told them I was going to call you and they're on speakerphone. And I'm like, cool, what's the plan? What are we doing? We're obviously transporting to the hospital at this point. How do you want to do it? And giving people, I think, the autonomy to choose how they want to get themselves treated.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I just want to say that me and Kevin both, we had a person that we worked with that we both knew in the local community that committed suicide, and she was, I think, a
Mhm.
respiratory therapist, and no one knew. So I
Yeah.
just want to say, like, your life does not stop in this moment. And so if
Mhm.
you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, maybe that is me. Maybe I have been thinking about suicide a lot. You don't have to reach out to us, but reach out to somebody you trust and make
Yeah.
that important
Absolutely.
today. Yeah.
Tell
Good.
someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder. When you think about the life of a first responder day in, day out, in and out, repeated small trauma, big trauma, having to find a way to, for lack of better terms, compartmentalize. It might be the wrong term. Correct me
Mhm.
if I'm wrong, but compartmentalize that so that you can go back to the next call. You can get back on shift and go right into the next call and still be at 100%. Years and years of that accumulated trauma. This is kind of a two-part question. What are some strategies for that individual who has to go right back into it? And a lot of times we have to go home from a shift and engage
Mhm.
with our families and be present for our families and be healthy for our families. What are some strategies for those types of people?
I absolutely want you to compartmentalize. I want you to do it temporarily, though. think here's the thing, like, you may need to compartmentalize to go back into your shift. You may need to compartmentalize to go home and parent or be a spouse, but I need it on your to-do list. This idea of maybe I don't feel like I need to go talk to a therapist about this, but I do want to talk to somebody I work with in 2 days when I work again and just kind of get it out. Or I do want to follow up on that patient because sometimes that feels better. Or I do want to ask, I do want to tell my spouse about this. I just need a couple of days before I'm ready to talk about it. So I want you to compartmentalize because that actually is a really healthy coping skill, unless you compartmentalize permanently, right? So the processing still has to occur. And I think when we look at this compounding trauma and we look at what we call CPTSD, which is complex PTSD, and that's a complex PTSD is this idea that we're taking people who are oversaturated in traumatic events and events that we call respectively smaller events that are building up over time. It's not your 9/11s, right? It's your frequent calls. We're diagnosing guys who've got 25, 30 years in the field because that's when we're seeing that come to the surface, right? And it's because they've been compartmentalizing for decades and not letting it out. So I need the stuff to come out, even if it seems smaller to you. And looking for things like, listen, like, does your sleep seem different for a couple of days after a call? And you're like, yeah, but then it went away. That signals to me that you need to process, right? Did you feel disconnected from your family for a day or two after the call? That signals to me that you need to process. So even when things don't seem like major symptoms, if something seems changed for a couple of days, that's a signal to me that you need to process.
That's good stuff. It reminds me, like, I think of my lifetime, like when I recognized that I had an issue that needed some intervention, some professional help. For me, I went out and sought therapy for what the incident that I thought was the catalyst for that. And over the next couple of years, we really uncovered that it was an incident probably within the first 6 months of my career, like 26 to 25 years earlier. And so when you look at an individual who has a lifetime of missed sleep, skipped meals, cold meals, all those repetitive tragedies and traumas stacked on top of each other, those constant adrenaline dumps. Man, I used to say every time the pager goes off or the house tones drop, that it's taking some level of finite number of minutes or days or years off the end of our life, just because that just the tone dropping, that adrenaline dump. How does that affect a person's brain over a lifetime?
So they've recently done some research on tones and how them continually going off is impacting people. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with like what they're trying to do with that, right? They have wearable tones. They have devices that are connected to your mattress that wake you up. Because what they found was that, listen, if I am a firefighter and I respond to a motor vehicle accident with adolescents and there's a poor outcome but I leave and I say to myself, like, I feel okay. Like, I don't feel great, but I feel okay. And then I go to bed. And 45 minutes later, the tones jolt me awake. When those tones jolt me awake, my brain connects that jolt with whatever it considers the nearest emergency. So now the motor vehicle accident that I walked away from and felt like okay about, my brain is now like, wait a minute. Now we have all this cortisol. We have all this adrenaline. That was an emergency. And you now go on to the next call, which is, a grandmother who can't find her dentures. And, you're pilling through her living room trying to help her find them. And it's not an emergency at all, right? But your brain is like, wait a minute, so it must have been that car accident. So now all of a sudden you're thinking about something that you maybe won't process because you've already kind of put it away, but your brain is still processing all those neurotransmitters and all those chemicals in the way that it would have if that call had impacted you in a different way. So I think, yeah, listen, one of my biggest soapboxes I will get on is tones. I don't know the answer. And that's probably my biggest problem is I don't know exactly how we change it. But I will tell you that you were not intended for someone to get close to your ear and scream in your ear multiple times a night. That is not actually how your brain was developed. And unless you are a new mother, and I hate to say this because it doesn't actually happen for men, unless you are a new mother, your brain doesn't actually, that is the only time your brain excretes a hormone that decreases your risk of things like stroke if someone screams in your ear. And it's because nature has designed you temporarily to have your ear screamed in the middle of the night. But one, that actually doesn't happen for men, even if you have kids. And two, it doesn't happen indefinitely. So that blaring noise is really bad for you.
That is
That's
crazy. Wow, what a
I
concept.
yeah, I never would have pieced together that screaming kid in your ear. Like I think when my kids were young, they did that to me one time, and it was like they very quickly learned, hey, like we're gonna go wake mom up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and
Yeah,
so they
yeah,
went over to her side of the bed.
yeah.
Yeah, I think what she's talking about is women when they have babies, there's a hormone that's excreted to only hear their babies like cry in the middle of the night. It'll wake them up. And like your body's fine tuned to that
Yeah.
frequency, right?
Yeah, it doesn't cause
Right.
harm in that moment. So like it doesn't, when that hormone excretes, it doesn't cause harm for the new mother. So it doesn't drive up her likelihood of stroke. However, if you are not at that time in your life, or you are a male and you are being jolted awake like that, things like stroke and cardiac events increase because
So
you are
this
not
so
supposed to be
so
screamed at.
so maybe I'm wrong here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I probably am. What I hear is that all the fathers out there just got off the hook for sleeping through the night
Yeah.
when mama gets
Yes.
up to wake up the baby
Listen,
or
I didn't.
to the screaming baby.
Yes, you're not wrong. I didn't tell my husband about the study until my kid was 3. So I intentionally withheld that information from him for quite a while. But that is exactly what I'm saying,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is true. So, what is something that you think that first responders who are struggling with mental health could do today to change their mental health?
If there's one thing you could do today, it would be, I need you to stop your body for 25 minutes today. If you nap, that's even better, because all that restoration occurs, all that cell regeneration occurs in that moment. But I need you to sit down. I know everyone's a landscaper afterwards. Everyone works construction on the weekends. Everyone has 43 jobs. And if you live in New England, they snowplow all winter. I just need you to sit down. I just need you to sit down for 25 minutes. I need you to watch one episode of Friends, and then you can get up and go do the world's going to continue to spinning. And here's the thing. If you are not taking care of yourself and you die, the world continues to spin anyway. And you know what? Your floor still doesn't get mopped. So sit down. I just need you to sit down for
I
a
love
little
that.
bit every day. And if you are one of those departments where you are working 24s are the bane of my existence as a clinician. Uh, I realize that they are super efficient in other ways, childcare, all that. I get it. But as a clinician, I hate them. So if you get off at 24, God forbid a 48 or 96, for the love of God, sit down. I just need you to sit down. Sit down, put your feet up, sit down. That is the fastest thing you can do for your mental health, is I need you to stop moving your bodies. They don't need to constantly be in motion.
That's a good point. I'm gonna
That's a good
interject here.
point.
Like I think it took me a lot of years to recognize. We used to call my first day off. So I work a 48-96. So we're on for 2 days, on off for 4. And I used to call it, there's a trend calling that first day off a trash day, right?
Mhm.
Like that's the day I come home trash. Like I'm just useless, right? And yet we, like you said, we don't stop. We find something else to keep us busy because we don't want to sit in our own
Right.
cesspool of emotions and thoughts. And so we just stay busy and we keep plugging in. And I've reframed that for me personally has become a recovery day. I don't
Cool.
want to have a trash day. I want to have a recovery day, and I want to
Cool.
be still that day. I don't schedule anything on that first day off. Like I'm intentional about protecting that time. So I'll throw that out there for all the individuals, guys and gals that are working that type of schedule. Like reframe trash to be a recovery day, because you don't deserve trash. You deserve to recover and heal.
Yeah. You just worked 48 hours.
Yeah.
It's okay to sit down. Like
Yeah.
that. The rest of
Yeah.
us work 8 and we're exhausted on the ride home.
Yeah.
You're allowed to sit down. That is a very reasonable thing to do. There's nothing, the culture within the fire service has shifted that to make it seem selfish. Sit down. You just worked 48 hours. Sit down, please.
Yes. And a lot of times nurses, especially at night, is where I work,
Mm.
they come to work with like 2 hours of sleep because they didn't want to like miss their off day the day
Yeah.
before. And then when they go home the next day, they're just up with the kids, and then I might as well be up and continue to be up. And then they're up the entire next day. And
Yeah.
sometimes I have really strict like sleep boundaries. Like when I'm asleep on my off day, do not wake me up until 1 p.m.
Yeah.
at least. At least. And when people like, I can be a little moody when I wake up, even a little like 1 o'clock, I can still be moody if I don't get good sleep. And I tell my husband, I'm like, give me a break. It's still 3 o'clock in the morning, my time.
Yes.
You know, it's like
Yes.
people don't realize that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if we're stubborn. First responders are the most stubborn people on the planet. So what would you say to that stubborn person who maybe is concerned about money or any other plethora of excuses that you can say? How would you really sell therapy to them right now?
Honestly, if you want, and this might be my New England, listen, I'm from the
Oh,
Northeast. I'm from New England.
yeah.
Our approach is a little different, but like, fine, give me every excuse in the book. You're going to die, or you're going to get divorced, or your kids aren't going to speak to you. So as long as you're okay with all of those things, then your excuses are valid. We all have things to do. None of us like being vulnerable. We all have kids to take care of. We all have houses to clean. We all have, but here's the thing: when it comes to mental health, you're going to get divorced. Your kids aren't going to speak to you, or you're going to die. So which is it that you want? And the thing that we know about retirement is 48 months post-retirement is the highest likelihood of death for individuals who do not have a life outside of the fire service. So if you've ever been to a retirement party and then 3 months later you've been at their wake, you need to have an identity outside of the fire service and you need to take care of yourself. And if you don't want to do any of that, and I say to you like, okay, then you're gonna die, whether it's a cardiac event or a suicidal idea, whatever it may be, right? If you're okay with that, that's a choice, my friend. But otherwise, go to therapy, cut it out.
I love that. I love New Englanders. I know this is not that kind of podcast, but I recently moved from Mississippi to New Hampshire, and now I live in Maine and work in New Hampshire. I love New Englanders. Mississippi, you can never tell if a woman really likes you or not. She's going to be fake nice. New Hampshire, I don't have to worry. I know if they like
Yeah.
me or don't like me. It's immediate. So thank you for that. I love your honesty. I wish more people would just be honest.
Yeah, I love it's candor, right? It's cold hard. It's not necessarily even cold hard truth. It's just hard truth. It's
Yeah,
just
it is.
it's cold because you're from New England. You get more snow and colder temps than we do here in Missouri. But I love that brutal honesty because I think, and to me, I think that resonates with first responders. Like, hey man, just tell me how it is. Like, don't sugarcoat it for me. It's like going to a doctor and him sugarcoating your cancer diagnosis. Hey man, just tell me
That's
how
right.
it is. Like, it sucks.
Right.
I don't want to hear it, but don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what I need to hear. That's what I love
Right.
about you. Yeah.
Right.
So, Jennifer, what is next for you? What are you working on?
I am working on truly getting more departments to do what I've been able to do in Rhode Island. And that is getting other states to understand that peer support is fantastic, but I need you to get a clinician in there. I need you to familiarize your members with the idea of therapy. I need you to move the Wizard of Oz from behind the screen, right? I think it needs to be this idea of we just need to make therapy more accessible. We need to make it more familiar, more common. And so I'd like to get other states to kind of get on board with that. And I'm trying to train my baby therapists to pick a specialty. So I've actually been bringing in a handful of firefighters to my graduate classes. And I'm like, guys, do your worst. And they do. They say they say the
The
craziest
craziest
stuff
stuff.
to these 23-year-olds. And then I say, like, listen, guys, if you thought that was interesting and funny, this might be the population for you. If you were horrified, don't work with first responders. So I think like training new therapists, getting people who are trauma informed but specialize with the occupation, I think is super important as well.
And then where can we find all of your content and your therapy services?
Most likely on my Instagram, it is JL Weaver LLC. Is my Instagram handle, and that is where most of my stuff is.
And your link tree has your website, right?
Yes, has my
Okay,
website and all that in there. Yeah.
perfect. And if you want to know where to find
Awesome.
a silent war within, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Playlists, whatever, all the things, YouTube. And you'll see my beautiful face if you watch on Spotify or YouTube, and Jason's beautiful face and Jennifer's beautiful face. But do you have any questions you want to ask us, Jennifer?
You guys are fantastic. No, I have compliments for you. I don't have any questions for you. I actually just think you guys were fantastic. I think that you are doing the thing that we need more people in the field to do, right?
Mhm.
Like we can have clinicians bang on your door all night because that's just kind of this is our shtick. But the buy-in is what's keeping your members alive.
Yeah. And we
That's
were really
awesome.
big when we started this podcast. Well, yeah, I was just going to say, we were really big when we started this podcast about knowing that people in your community care about you, your mental health. We have a lot of listeners related around like Memphis, Tennessee, and that's where Kevin's from. And I'm family with Kevin. So they're kind of like all our friends and family. And just know that people that you know care about your mental health and want you to reach out to them. So
Yeah. I
what
was
were you
going to
going to say,
pivot
Jason?
back. I was just going to pivot backwards. I forgot to ask you when you're like, I'm always curious about people's story. Why Polaris as the name of your company?
It was my baby brother at the time. Polaris is the name for the North Star. And we were talking about naming the practice after some sort of direction. And it was my littlest brother who was like, what about Polaris?
Awesome.
And we liked how it sounded, so we ran with it.
I love it. I love it. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. This
has been it's just as much fun for me. It was a pleasure meeting you. Appreciate what you're doing in the field.
And Jennifer, it's a running joke, so just bear with me. But everyone get your credit cards ready. I'm going to charge you $1.99 after this when I say our closing. Be safe, take care of your mind, and we will talk soon. Bye, guys.
See ya.
You've been listening to A Silent War Within. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you're not alone and your well-being matters. It's time to end this silent war.